Imagine a cosmonaut floating inside a space station. They take a metal wing nut, unthread it from a bolt, and just let it spin freely in the microgravity of the cabin.
Right, just hovering there.
Exactly. For a few seconds, it spins perfectly smoothly in the air, but then, out of nowhere, without a single thing touching it, the wing nut just violently flips 180 degrees.
It's so wild to watch.
It really is. It keeps spinning in this new orientation for a few more seconds, and then, bam, it violently flips back. I mean, if you watch a video of this, it genuinely looks like a glitch in the Matrix.
Yeah, it looks like the simulation is completely broken.
Totally. Well, today, we're going to show you why that exact same zero-gravity space glitch is the reason you probably can't shoot a handgun straight.
It is such a profound connection to make. I mean, we are taking a concept from astrophysics and orbital mechanics and applying it directly to human biomechanics.
Welcome to today's deep dive. If you are the kind of learner who wants to just completely bypass the tired, repetitive range myths you hear from self-proclaimed gurus.
The whole just try harder crap.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
If you want to get straight to the underlying science of human performance, you are going to love this. Today, we are pulling from a highly technical and, frankly, brilliant article from Valortech.
It's a great piece.
It was written by firearms instructor Herfel, published on June 3, 2026, and it's titled Dzhanibekov Effect and Handgun Recoil Control.
Which sets an incredibly ambitious goal, right? Basically dismantling the traditional advice given to shooters for, decades at this point.
Yeah, we are going to unpack why yelling, "just grip harder," at someone holding a firearm is mathematically and scientifically flawed. Whether you are prepping for a high-stress environment or you just find the limits of human biomechanics insanely curious, we're going to bridge the gap between rigid body dynamics and the shooting range.
It's going to be a fun one.
Okay, let's unpack this. To understand what goes wrong in your hands when a gun goes off, we have to start with that tumbling wing nut in the vacuum of space. How does a spinning object just decide to flip over on its own?
So it comes down to a physics principle called the Dzhanibekov effect, which is also known as the intermediate axis theorem.
Okay.
When that cosmonaut spins the wing nut, they are introducing rotational energy to a rigid body. And in physics, we rely on Euler's equations for rigid body dynamics to predict where that energy is, going to go.
Right.
Every rigid object has three principal axes of inertia. You can think of them as the three distinct physical dimensions an object can naturally rotate around.
So like an axis that runs lengthwise, one that runs crosswise, and one that runs right through the middle.
Precisely that. And the mathematics of Euler's equations dictate a very strict rule for how objects behave in motion. If you rotate an object around its smallest axis of inertia, it is highly stable.
Okay.
If you rotate it around its largest axis of inertia, it is also perfectly stable. But that middle one, the intermediate axis, that's where the physics start to break down. Rotation around that intermediate axis is inherently and unavoidably unstable.
To give you a real-world analogy you can try right now in your living room, think about flipping a tennis racket.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
Right. If you hold it by the handle and spin it like a wheel on an axle, it spins clean. That is a stable axis. If you hold the handle and roll the racket over like a rolling pin, it also spins clean.
Right, that's another stable axis.
But if you try to flip that tennis racket end over end, almost like tossing a coin, it is nearly impossible to get it to flip perfectly straight. It will always awkwardly twist and wobble side to side while it's in the air. That wobbling is the Dzhanibekov effect in action. You are forcing the object to rotate on its intermediate axis.
What's fascinating here is the core lesson of the equation itself. When an object rotates around an unstable axis, even the most microscopic, completely invisible physical disturbances become massive, exaggerated deviations.
Because the energy has nowhere else to go.
Exactly. The rotational energy cannot just disappear. Because the axis cannot hold the structure stable, that energy violently shifts the object to find a new equilibrium. That is why the wing nut flips 180 degrees in space. The instability literally overpowers the object.
So if that is what happens to a wing nut floating in a vacuum, how does this translate to a person holding a Glock at the local shooting range? Because, my hands aren't a vacuum, and a gun isn't a wing nut.
The environment changes, sure, but the underlying laws of rigid body dynamics do not. A handgun locked into a human grip is still a rigid body subjected to massive, sudden forces.
Right, a controlled explosion.
Yeah. When a firearm discharges, we are dealing with extreme energy. If the physical structure holding that firearm is unstable across its rotational axis, the exact same mathematical chaos occurs. The energy forces massive, exaggerated deviations in the object.
Let's dig into that transition from a linear explosion to a rotational problem, because at its core, a bullet firing is just straight-line physics, isn't it?
Yes, at the moment of ignition, it is a purely linear event. The expanding propellant gases force the projectile forward down the barrel at a massive velocity. Due to the conservation of momentum, physics requires an equal and opposite reaction.
Which is the recoil.
Exactly. That is the rearward impulse on the firearm. It is a straight linear pushback toward the shooter.
And the article points out that the firearms industry actually calculates this technical recoil using SAMI recoil formulae. When engineers are testing guns, they are measuring linear momentum, like free recoil energy and recoil velocity. They aren't measuring flip, they're measuring a straight backward explosion.
Right. Purely linear measurements.
Okay, so when people say a gun kicks up, that's actually a myth. It's not kicking up, it's just moving backward, and our hands are acting like a pivot point that forces the muzzle to rise.
That distinction is the key to everything. The gun has zero desire to flip upward. If it were floating in space, it would just fly straight backward indefinitely. It wants to travel on a perfectly straight line through your chest.
Wow, okay.
But your hands are physically blocking that path.
We are putting a roadblock directly in the path of the linear momentum.
And because of how handguns are designed, the line the bullet travels on, which we call the bore axis, sits vertically above the highest point where your hand is actually gripping the gun.
So they aren't lined up.
Right. You have the line of force up high and the point of resistance down low. That vertical offset creates a mechanical lever, or what engineers call a moment arm.
So by just holding the gun, we are unintentionally turning a straight line explosion into rotational torque. The gun is acting like a literal crowbar against our own joints.
The physics formula for this is incredibly straightforward. Rotational torque equals the linear recoil force multiplied by the vertical distance between the bore axis and your resistance point.
It is simply force times distance.
Yeah. If the gun's barrel sits high and your grip on the frame sits low, you have a very long moment arm.
Meaning you are giving the machine a massive mechanical advantage over your wrists. The longer the lever, the more violently that straight backward force gets converted into upward rotation.
And if your body fails to manage that rotational torque properly, you invite the Dzhanibekov effect right into your hands. You introduce rotational instability.
Which brings us to arguably the most frustrating part of learning to shoot. I mean, we've all been there. You are at the range, the gun is snapping violently, and the instructor behind you just starts yelling generic commands. Grip harder, crush the gun, lock your wrists.
It is the traditional model of firearms training. It frames recoil management as a pure test of brute strength, man versus machine.
Right.
But relying on sheer muscle tension is incomplete advice at best and actively destructive at worst. The author highlights that handgun recoil is not a simple two-dimensional up and down motion. Just like the tumbling wingnut in space, recoil is a three-axis problem.
We're dealing with pitch, yaw, and roll. Pitch is the classic muzzle rise, the gun pivoting up and then returning down. Yaw is the gun deviating horizontally, drifting to the left or the right. And roll is the gun physically twisting or canting side to side inside your palms.
And we just assume that if we apply maximum muscle force, we can crush all three of these axes into submission simultaneously.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When you try to fight a three-axis physics problem with blind tension, you actually guarantee a mechanical failure. You make yourself a worse shooter by trying harder.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, think about what applying maximum grip force actually does to human physiology. When you squeeze your hands as hard as you can, you create sympathetic tension all the way up your forearms to your shoulders.
Oh yeah, you get stiff all over.
Right. You introduce immediate muscle tremor because the muscles are fighting each other. You fatigue incredibly quickly. But most crucially, you destroy your ability to isolate your trigger finger. Human biomechanics do not allow your index finger to press a trigger smoothly and straight to the rear when your middle, ring, and pinky fingers are squeezing the grip panel with 100 pounds of pressure.
So you have built a structure that is blind, trembling, and exhausted. And because you are shaking from tension, you are essentially introducing those micro disturbances we talked about with the space wing nut. The chaotic energy of the gunshot hits that tense structure and simply finds the path of least resistance.
It will not pitch perfectly up and down because your structure is flawed. The energy will bypass the pitch axis and express itself as roll or yaw.
Right.
The gun will twist in your hands or drift horizontally. Just like the mathematics of the intermediate axis theorem dictate, a poor structural foundation takes normal rotational energy and exaggerates it into wild, unpredictable movements.
It's a huge relief to hear that, honestly. It means managing a handgun isn't about having the grip strength of a silverback gorilla. It's about architecture. It's about how you design the structure of your grip to outsmart the physics.
We have to stop viewing the shooter and the firearm as two separate entities fighting each other. The second your hands wrap around that grip, you and the weapon become a single, coupled mechanical system. Your body physically alters the mathematical properties of the gun.
The article refers to this coupling using a term I find fascinating, mechanical impedance. Instead of just crushing the grip, the goal is to optimize your mechanical impedance.
In engineering, mechanical impedance is a measure of how much a structure resists motion when subjected to a given force. It is made up of three specific components: inertia, stiffness, and damping.
Okay, let's break that down.
When you hold the gun, the raw weight of your body mass provides inertia. Your joints and muscles provide stiffness. And your soft tissues, tendons, and biomechanical alignment provide damping, which is the system's ability to absorb and dissipate vibration over a period of time.
So building out this mechanical impedance is kind of like upgrading the suspension and shocks on a truck. You aren't trying to magically make the bumps in the road disappear. You are just designing a structure that absorbs and dampens that kinetic energy so smoothly that the chassis of the truck stays perfectly level.
That analogy is spot on. You want a tuned suspension, not a solid brick. And the most critical component of your biological suspension system is the wrist, because it sits directly behind the recoil impulse.
Right, it takes the brunt of it.
If you follow the old advice to just lock your wrists like you are freezing a door hinge, you make the joint brittle. When that rapid perturbation of energy hits a rigidly locked wrist, the joint will simply collapse, or the energy will violently snap the gun upward.
To fix that, the VelourTech piece introduces a motor control strategy called co-contraction. How does a shooter actually achieve that without just reverting back to squeezing the life out of the gun?
Co-contraction means simultaneously activating opposing muscle groups around a joint to stabilize it dynamically rather than statically. You don't achieve this by crushing your fingers into your palm. You achieve it through directed pressure.
What does that look like in practice?
Think of applying tension front to back with your firing hand, almost as if you are squeezing a pair of pliers while your support hand clamps firmly side to side. Research shows that utilizing co-contraction allows you to completely decouple joint stiffness from absolute grip force.
Meaning you can have wrists of steel while your actual fingers are relatively relaxed, allowing that index finger to work the trigger flawlessly.
Yes, exactly.
And by establishing that co-contraction, you route the chaotic energy away from the small, weak joints of the hands and push it back into the massive shock absorbers of your arms, shoulders, and torso.
But the mechanical impedance of your joints is only half the equation. We also have to address the literal contact patch between the human and the machine, the skin-to-grip friction. The physics of friction play a massive role here. Frictional force is equal to the coefficient of friction multiplied by the normal force.
Let's translate that for someone standing at the shooting range. The coefficient of friction is basically how grippy the surface is, like skin against textured plastic. And the normal force is the amount of physical pressure pushing straight horizontally into that surface.
Applying that equation completely redefines the role of your non-firing hand or your support hand. The support hand is not there to gently cup the bottom of the gun or to just help hold the weight. Its primary job is to dramatically increase both the frictional coefficient and the normal force on the side panels of the grip.
You want to take the meaty part of your support hand palm, wedge it into the empty space on the side of the gun, and apply aggressive horizontal pressure.
Yes.
By doing that, you are physically clamping the gun from the sides. You are locking out the yaw and roll axes. The gun literally cannot twist or drift sideways because you have built a high-friction wall on either side of it.
You force the energy back into the pitch axis, which is predictable and manageable. And there is one more geometric cheat code you can apply. You remember our moment arm equation from earlier? Force times distance.
Where the vertical distance between the barrel and our hands acts like a crowbar.
By using a high tang grip, driving the web of your firing hand as absurdly high up on the backstrap of the pistol as physically possible, you shrink that vertical distance. You're physically reducing the h variable in the mathematical equation.
You are shortening the crowbar.
Yeah.
You are literally changing the geometry of the physics problem before the bullet even fires.
The combination of these elements, shortening the moment arm, maximizing side-to-side friction, and tuning the mechanical impedance of the wrists, completely neutralizes the chaotic elements of the Dzhanibekov effect.
So we have upgraded our biological suspension system. But how do we actually know if it's working? I mean, You can't exactly pause a gunshot midair to check your math. So what does this all mean for you when you pack your range bag and head out for practice tomorrow?
The answer lies in how we utilize modern firearms accessories, things like weapon-mounted lights, compensators, and especially pistol-mounted red dot optics. We have to view these not just as tactical upgrades, but through the lens of rigid body dynamics. When you bolt a brass weight or a flashlight to the front frame of a gun, you are fundamentally changing the mass distribution of the object.
You're shifting its moments of inertia. Adding weight to the front makes it harder for the energy to lift the muzzle.
It heavily influences how the recoil is mathematically expressed. But the absolute most vital piece of technology here is the red dot optics sitting on top of the slide. Traditionally, people view a red dot as nothing more than a simplified aiming tool. Put the dot on the target, pull the trigger. But in a science-based training paradigm, that red dot becomes an incredible real-time diagnostic instrument.
It essentially functions as a high-speed telemetry screen for your biomechanics. The dot gives you a visual readout of exactly what your mechanical structure did during the explosion.
This raises an important question. How do you read that telemetry? When the gun fires, you cannot just blink and wait for the dot to magically reappear in the window. You must track the visual path it takes during the recoil cycle.
Right.
If your moment arm is minimized, your friction is high, and your mechanical impedance is tuned correctly, the dot will rise straight up along the pitch axis and return consistently to the exact same spot on the target.
It tracks like it's on an invisible vertical rail.
But if your structure is flawed, if that dot arcs diagonally across the glass, or disappears from the window completely, or returns to a point 3 inches left of where you started, you don't guess what went wrong. The math proves it. You have yaw or roll sneaking into your system. You might be applying uneven friction with your support hand, or your wrist co-contraction might have collapsed.
This diagnostic approach is exactly why Valortech outlines a 5-layer recoil axis control framework for instructors and shooters. It's a roadmap for completely leaving the grip harder myth in the dust. Let's walk through how you actually apply these 5 layers, because this is the practical core of everything we've discussed today.
Layer 1 is the force line. Before you even fire, you must mentally identify the exact linear direction of the recoil impulse based on the gun's bore axis. You need to know what you are resisting.
Layer 2 is the moment arm. This is where you physically choke up on the grip, getting your hand as high as possible to shrink that lever and rob the gun of its mechanical advantage.
Layer 3 focuses on rotational axes. You use the structure of your support hand to create complete symmetry. By clamping down on the side panels and filling the empty space, you mathematically block the gun from entering yaw or roll.
Layer 4 is mechanical impedance. This is your truck suspension. You establish that front-to-back and side-to-side co-contraction in the wrists and arms. You increase the stiffness and the damping of your joints without resorting to the blind tension that ruins your trigger finger.
And layer 5 is visual return. You fire the shot, keep your eyes open, and watch the behavior of the red dot to verify if the previous 4 layers were executed correctly. If the dot tracks straight, your system works. If it deflects, you adjust the structure.
If an instructor at the range is not diagnosing your grip through these specific layers, and is instead just cheering you on or yelling generic slogans about muscle strength, they are fundamentally failing to address the mechanical reality of shooting. They're just hoping you accidentally stumble into the correct physics. Serious, repeatable performance under stress is built on rigid body dynamics, not cheerleading.
It is about giving the shooter a profound sense of agency. When you understand the forces at play, the firearm ceases to be a wild, uncontrollable beast. It becomes a predictable mechanical system responding to your inputs.
Which brings us to the ultimate overarching takeaway from this deep dive. If you remember absolutely nothing else from our conversation today, remember this central thesis. You cannot stop recoil.
The conservation of momentum strictly forbids it. The kinetic energy exists. It must go somewhere.
But you can use structure, friction, and biomechanics to shape it. You are intentionally funneling that chaotic, tumbling energy into a highly predictable, trackable pathway. Whether you are a professional operating in a high-stakes environment or just a lifelong learner fascinated by the intersection of math and the human body, applying these scientific models will yield dramatically better results than relying on outdated traditions.
Moving from brute force to biomechanical efficiency is a massive paradigm shift.
And I want to leave you with a final, slightly mind-bending thought that comes directly from this concept of mechanical impedance. Think about the profound implications of what it means when the author says, the human body becomes part of the firearm's mechanical structure the very second it is gripped. It means that the exact same handgun, firing the exact same ammunition on the exact same day, actually becomes a completely different mechanical system depending on whose hands it is in.
The mass, the center of gravity, the stiffness, the damping, all of the variables change the instant a new person picks the object up off the table.
The gun doesn't have a set binary recoil value. The recoil, the literal physical behavior of that machine in time and space, is entirely defined by you. Your structure is the physics. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and keep questioning the mechanics of everything around you.